Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the AIM Search podcast, where I'm fortunate enough to interview Anthony Enoh, the founder of Enbros Technologies, who's going to tell us a little bit about what his business is doing to democratise the cybersecurity industry. So, Anthony, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, David. Really appreciate you being here.
So, my pleasure. And I'd like to start, Anthony, if it's okay, with your mission. I think it's such a powerful mission that you've got. And before I kind of butcher it and ruin it, I'd love to kind of invite you to talk to us a bit about, why you set up Enbros Technologies, what you do, and I guess what's the overarching kind of mission that you're hoping to achieve.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Really appreciate being here. So I guess for me, it was really key when I just taking a step back, looking across the technology landscape. And for me, when we think about technology regions of the world, first thing you think about Silicon Valley, right? First thing you think about technology, you think about Apple, Google, those places. Then if we carry on asking the question, okay, where else could you think about technology? We'd also think, in fact, China's got some really good locations, and then you start to think, okay, outside the US and China, where else? Okay, maybe in India, yeah, some locations there, really innovative tech. Keep going, Malaysia, okay, keep going. You can keep going on this list as long as you will. You will never talk about Sub-Saharan Africa, right? And for me, that's a problem. So my heritage is Nigerian. My parents are Nigerian, immigrated here to the UK in the 70s and 80s. And for me, growing up and having that heritage, seeing the talent in Nigeria from a technical perspective, there's always been a gap for me. And so in the back of my mind, I always ask that question, why is it that the technology specialists in Nigeria, the world doesn't know anything about it? So how could I change it? And really, that's really what my purpose is, and my mission is to provide that bridge, right? To link between the talent, right? The sort of concentration of talent within Sub-Saharan Africa with the rest of the world. I kind of liken it to the idea of this paradise that no one knows about, full of technical resource, and everyone just keeps sailing past this paradise and just not taking a second to detour to just go in and have a look. So my mission really is to create that sign that says, hey guys, come and have a look at this. So what we're doing with Enbros really is about providing that export of talent, really, to say, look, we've got some really good engineers, some bright minds, and really we want to show the world that. I'll take it one step further if I could, David. I am a massive technologist, right? And so I am watching every single time any of the AI labs, they showcase their new model, right? There's the typical setup, right? You've seen them as well. There's 4 or 5 people sat around the table, black background or some sort of background. Then it's like, hey, I am so-and-so, the chief data scientist. I'm the product owner. And for me, I think, and this is kind of, again, a personal thing for me, every single time these big AI labs have these big demonstrations, right? I said they're big announcements, but they try to be really modest and have a team of 4 to show it, right? That's the new trend. But never have I seen anybody from Sub-Saharan Africa on that table. Now, to most people, that's just going to go over their heads and they don't think about it, right? But what I'm thinking about is the future. If AI is the future, right, and it's going to be, people describe it as as revolutionary as fire itself. Some people have said that. Then we look at the young children growing up today, looking at those announcements, and if they don't see people that they could relate to, then naturally our minds, and we know this, there's been so many studies to say, look, you can't be what you can't see. And so for me, there is that kind of, I guess, personal mission to try and democratize this piece and kind of show the world that, yes, there are bright minds everywhere in the world, and just show that that representation across the piece. Not a social justice movement, can I just be clear on that, right? It's very much a case of just saying, hey, look, there's talent everywhere, and sometimes the world does overlook the talent in Africa. Let me be part of that mission to showcase, actually, there's some really extremely economically viable opportunities to export some of that talent from Sub-Saharan Africa to the rest of the world.
Wow, fantastic. When people talk about kind of purpose-led missions or purpose-led founders, I guess you're the absolute kind of epitome of that. And you spoke in so well and in so much detail about showcasing the talent that Sub-Saharan Africa has to offer. And I think an interesting thing that you kind of led into was talking about, while the world is kind of focused on product and AI specifically, actually showcasing the talent, getting that representation up on stage, particularly to inspire a younger generation, whether it is, talent in Sub-Saharan Africa, or it is like yourself, people that have kind of, come over, and actually you're seeing that representation, seeing those C-suite or those people kind of doing the demos are actually, from the same sort of countries and backgrounds as yourself. Now, so I love that. I love that mission. You talked also about the economic viability of outsourcing and engaging with the talent that's in Sub-Saharan Africa. Talk about that a little bit more, and talk about why that's such an attractive business proposition for the clients you work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, so I would say I sit on the intersection of some major trends, right? So we've got the whole AI piece, vibes coding, we're seeing what these models are pulling up, and, some really interesting stuff. There's also the other cross current, if you would, and that is the fact that within Sub-Saharan Africa, and I'm going to speak specifically to Nigeria, we've got so much talent. And if we look at some of the data that's coming out from a demographics perspective, 60% of the population are below the age of 30. So what that means is we have got the majority of the demographic in Nigeria, just taking Nigeria as a use case, right, are digital native, and some would argue are starting to become the AI native, right? So what that means is we've got people who have grown up with understanding and working with technology. The majority of people growing up working with technology. And so there's kind of a natural place, right? Their natural place is working in a digital ecosystem and so on. So when we start to marry those two themes, when they start to come together, we start to see, well, the economics make significance, make real, like really important sense here, right? Because we've got a place like Nigeria where we've got very high levels of, how do I say this? So we've got somewhere like Nigeria, which has got like low population, right? So loads of population. And again, the common kind of knowledge of when you've got low demand, high supply. So we've got a massive supply of humans. And I think that's probably Nigeria's greatest resource. It's just loads of humans, loads of brains, right? In between ears, right? And then what they don't have is a high level of employment, right? So therefore, there creates this dynamic there where we can then start to position people to export some of that. And again, the beauty of working a digital ecosystem like this is right now we're having a conversation, different parts of the country, right? But we can still add value. We don't have to be co-located to achieve the same value, right? And so it's kind of taking that model and saying, actually, we don't need our delivery teams to necessarily be co-located in a single office in London. We can have teams across the world working on this. And the beauty of working with somewhere like Nigeria is, especially now, the time zones are bang on, right? So we're talking about, synchronous time zones. We're talking about, again, this is specifically for the UK market, right? We're talking about a Commonwealth country, Nigeria, same time zone. English language is the official language of Nigeria. Everybody speaks English. And so then it creates a dynamic where we've got the lower cost of labor, blended that with the, with AI coding and I call it AI co-piloting. I don't want to sort of say AI co-pilot to be like Microsoft, but just the idea of co-piloting, whether that's for app development, that's say SOC scenario use cases, whether that's for strategy development, whatever it is, right? If you were to take a Nigerian resource, a highly skilled Nigerian resource, add in the AI co-pilot element, we then start to see actually to deliver that project that has been the back of our mind, we've been skipping it over for a while now because it's too hard, too difficult, too expensive. Well, actually, we start to kind of pull the levers and some of that calculus starts to make a lot more sense. A really good example, if I may, if we look at something like asset management, and everyone hates asset management because asset management is a thing for the past 20 years. Everyone knows that they should know where all the assets are, but it's always so difficult to start to do asset management because there could be, in some organizations I've worked with, like millions of unassigned assets. Don't know who's who and where. And so there's been so many tools that's tried to come in and solve the problem. But the truth of the matter is, right, you're going to need somebody with a clipboard to go around and say, this system here, no, it's not with you. It's stuff like that. AI can come in and try to solve that by itself. And we've seen time and time again, like true asset discovery just doesn't work by itself. There's always that human element. And so for me, I see the whole AI revolution, everyone's kind of looking at it to be a software driven kind of change the world with a chatbot. My view is humans are going to be front and center of that. It's going to be human plus AI. And that's where I'm placing my bets. So for me, it's the human, it would be central to the AI revolution. It's using AI as operating leverage, right? It's turning that developer from a good developer to an excellent developer. It's taking an analyst that could only work on one project to actually can work on 6 projects all at once. So that's the kind of vision, and that's kind of how I see it. And so for me, it's coupling that with low cost of labor from somewhere like Nigeria really brings those cross currents together and provides that really compelling economic story of actually it starts to make sense now that we do this 6-month project that would have cost, let's just say, 200, 300, 400K to try to get to actually can cost 10K. Now that completely changes the dynamics. And then from that, the barriers start to lower now. It's like, actually, let's start to do some of this innovation projects because, the cost of innovation has now gone down and so on. But I could talk about this topic forever, David, honestly. So I kind of stop there.
Well, if I can try and attempt to sort of summarize what you said there, please feel free to jump in at any time and kind of correct anything I've butchered. But it sounds like, one thing I thought was really interesting, and I didn't even, pose a leading question with this one, but when you're talking about the AI revolution, obviously it's something everyone's talking about at the moment. You're saying humans are going to be front and center. So while there are these kind of behemoths out there that are building this sort of platform approach, trying to offer everything under the sun with their SaaS models, believe that it's still going to be humans are going to be front and center of this revolution. And if I'm reading between the lines correctly, I think you did actually directly say it, but with your low cost approach, sourcing this highly qualified talent from Nigeria, you're able to price compete or offer more financially viable solutions to maybe small and medium-sized businesses who maybe haven't got the budgets to afford some of these larger consulting houses to come in and do these digital transformation projects that might cost hundreds of thousands or millions to execute. You're able to offer lower cost solutions which has the human at the forefront of the technological transformation. Have I butchered that or?
No, you're spot on. Because if you look at the trend of all the kind of, you look at your startups over the last 10 years, 15 years, it's been like SaaS based, one size fits all. All right, we're going to solve this industry vertical. We're going to build one product that's going to serve everybody, right? And that's worked really, really, really well. But it's kind of worked too well in that you've got so many different SaaS products doing so many different things. But then when you look at it and you actually ask the individual organization, of these 110 features, what are actually specific to what you need as an organization, right? And when they ask that question, they're like, actually, the reason I use product X is because of features, 1 to 5. There's a lot of it that I didn't even know it could do it, right? And again, the whole ethos has been product velocity, add more features, get more, ARR to, get more seats in and so, so on and so forth. And so my argument is actually that's all well and good, but actually if the cost of development to develop a bespoke platform for your own organization actually meets an inflection point of, let's just say, for example, let's put some numbers out there. Let's say you're spending, let's say 30K a month on SaaS, right? If it costs, and let's just play around with some numbers here, right? Let's just say that the implementation of your bespoke system costs K, right? Actually, you can start to do the maths and think where that inflection point sits. And there are some other elements as well of, like I said, if it's a SaaS solution, one size fits all, it's not designed for your organization. It's a bit like going to H&M, right? You go to H&M, you get a white t-shirt, you got large, medium, small, right? It's not bespoke to you, David, right? It's not your size measurements. But what we're saying is with AI and with low cost of labor, we can actually come in really compelling and say, hey, look, don't go to H&M for the medium t-shirt. Let's get a t-shirt that's bespoke for you. That's got your arm length, your shoulder lengths. It takes into account how low you want the neckline to be. And I'm going to run out of steam with this analogy here because I'm not a fashion designer, but you see the point, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's the whole argument around humans being front and center of this is because AI, for me, will always be a tool that humans use. Now, no doubt there's going to be, and I know that the Silicon Valley way of doing things is let's create a tool and so on. But ultimately, for me, I see it as the true value will be humans using said tool to release the value. And that's where I'm placing my bets. Now, a time will tell what that looks and feels like. But for me, it's the AI integration around humans, business processes, that for me is really where the value will sit.
That's interesting. I appreciate you giving that insight. And I guess looking at the last couple of years, when it's been sort of the years of acquisition, that these kind of behemoths, whether it's CrowdStrike, Cyera, whatever, are gobbling up all these companies and acquiring all these companies to create this platform approach. Obviously, they're creating somewhat economies of scale. They're able to offer lower priced products, but I think for a lot of the small and medium sized businesses, they're still not cost-effective solutions. They're either paying for a whole platform and they're only using a small portion of it, and these things lack the customizations and the bespoke sort of solutions to their exact problems. So it sounds like that's where you're fitting in there and specifically addressing or providing that kind of white glove treatment, bespoke, customized solution, democratizing essentially cybersecurity and digital transformation for small and medium sized businesses, allowing them to get those benefits without having to, spend these hundreds of thousands on using bigger consulting houses. And I guess I'm kind of inferring from that, I know your background, which we've not kind of dived into. You have worked for some of the bigger kind of consulting houses and you worked for some of the bigger tech companies. Was that part of the mission then, I guess, setting up Enbros Technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would admit that I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit deep down inside, and I think it's the fact that that's always been kind of at the back of my mind. I was always going to do something. I didn't know what I was going to do, to be perfectly honest, right? And so my strategy, so it's kind of like you kind of just go through life following the cookie cutter approach. Start as an analyst, work your way through, become a senior consultant from the consultancy route that I went down, analyst through to consultant, senior consultant, principal consultant. You then start to go into the kind of leadership roles, director, blah 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 blah, all the titles and so on and so forth. Again, I've worked mainly in that kind of system integrator space, whether it's your defense primes or your true IT system integrators. I've working for them or partnering with them on large transformation projects. And what I'd found in all of that is that really from a delivery perspective, it was always account manager led and project management. And again, nothing to those practices. But to me, I feel like the real value was at the engineering level. And so for me, I've always wanted to strip away that how can we deliver value without having 10 different program portfolio projects, PMO research? How do we get rid of that and just say customer engineer? And how do we make that a shorter distance? And so I found that some of the pricing comes from the fact that there's so many costs in these big organizations, the amount of back office cost that goes into it, that's the reason why some of these deals are so massive. And some of these smaller organizations are coming in, smaller SMEs are coming in, but they just don't have the scale to be able to leverage. And I think AI is going to come and give that leverage. So that's where my prediction of actually I see these bigger organizations will start to struggle, in that type of environment. Now, a customer will always, we're humans, always wants that badge. Oh, we've got one of the big four coming in, we're safe, right? Humans will always have that social proof and that badge. But I feel like the age of AI will start to challenge that, because you're starting to get the case just becomes way too compelling as to why did I choose Big Four when I could have chosen SME to come and do this. And that day of reckoning is
Yeah, well, I guess AI levels the playing field, doesn't it, when everyone's got it at their disposal. And furthermore, what you were mentioning with some of the larger consultancies or some of the larger kind of system integrators you worked with in the past, it is a bit like Chinese whispers, right? That the more and more people you've got in the process, the more and more the message gets broken down. Whereas if you're able to work directly or much closer with your clients and get a better understanding, that message isn't getting lost in translation. You're able to execute on those plans and, stick within their sort of parameters and align with their goals much more accurately than when you've got 15 or 20 people between you and, the client, I guess.
absolutely.
I'm interested. You said that you've always had an entrepreneurial spirit. You always knew that you were going to become an entrepreneur, but you didn't know kind of what route you were going to go down. You talked about, that you went down the very traditional analyst, senior analyst, and working your way up there. Since you've launched your own business, what have been some of the kind of the key challenges and lessons you've learned? Maybe things you expected to encounter, but also some of the surprises you've met along the way.
Yeah, great question. I think for me, let's talk about the surprises first. And it's a good surprise. I am still really surprised the amount of support from like my network and people around me. And, I'm just eternally grateful to everyone who said, and speak to so-and-so. And again, unprompted, it's not necessarily been a question and I've reached out, but someone said, and I see what you're doing with this. Let me introduce you to so-and-so or have a chat with so-and-so. And I think that was just unexpected. I expected to be by myself, just just in a way at it. But I feel like, I guess my lesson there is that humans are a lot more warm and open than maybe we give credit to. Now, maybe we blame X, Twitter, maybe we blame society for sometimes showing us the worst sides of humanity. But my experience has been that most people are decent, honest, and will help. And actually, we're kind of programmed to help each other. And I find that's been a massive surprise. I wasn't expecting the amount of support that I've had from my network. So thank you to everybody who's helped me on this journey. In terms of challenges, I think it's juggling. And again, this is a personal challenge here, right? So I've kind of drank the Kool-Aid and swallowed the Silicon Valley pill and everything else, right? But but equally, I'm not building a specific product, right? Again, my challenge is I don't want to build a SaaS platform. That's not what I want to do. I want it to be a human-centric platform. Right. Good luck trying to figure out what that looks like, right? So I don't want to do the whole body shopping piece, right? I think like some of the other outsourcing parts, so look at the big Indian outsourcers, they do that really well. That's not really where I see the world going. It's innovation of how do you create a SaaS-like platform with humans at the center of it. That's the challenge, right? Because we're still working that out, what that looks and feels like. But for me, I feel like that is the challenge for me is just iterating and defining what you're doing based on a mission as opposed to, I would say, a clear vision. And what I mean by that is the mission drives the vision. So I don't have an end state. I couldn't tell you what Enbros would look and feel like. Because if I could tell you what it looks and feels like, I wouldn't be, well, by definition, I wouldn't be innovating. Would you agree?
Yeah,
I'd just be doing what someone else has done, right? So I am, and again, I think the challenge there is kind of controlling my emotions and my irrational and rational fears of actually what am I doing, where am I going, and trusting in the iterative innovation process, taking on board all the feedback that we're getting from customers, from partners and everybody else in this space. And so when we finally get to define what that looks and feels like, again, this people-centered platform mixed with AI and doing delivery and everything else, once we get that locked in, then I feel like that's when it'll be like, right, okay, we are truly innovating. But I guess there is a theory that I'm working with, and my prediction is that the idea of SaaS will start to decrease significantly purely because the return on investment doesn't match the outcomes. It's not bespoke enough. I spoke around the going to get your small, medium and large t-shirts. Once the price of a medium t-shirt from a bespoke tailor is on parity or cheaper than going to your generic H&M River Island, that day of reckoning will come, and we'll start to see the consumer shift from again, I'm picking on H&M here, but your high street, ready to wear, I think is the correct terminology, to the bespoke t-shirts being made. And in this example is technology. So for me, the challenge is kind of working towards an idea of the future, not having a clear vision, but an idea, but driven by the mission.
I love that. And I think the first thing you mentioned that kind of resonated particularly with me, having spent 3.5 or 4 years in cybersecurity recruitment space. Obviously, I built up like a big network there. I host a load of podcasts. I network with a load of fantastic people we're kind of mutually connected with. And I think when it turns to actually setting up your own business, you kind of forget about this network you have. And hopefully, I'm pretty confident with people I could turn to, that I've given enough value to them that if I ask for help in return, I'll probably be overwhelmed and surprised with the responses I've got. So that's something I'm guilty of not tapping into that network enough. And I think you mentioned a couple of reasons for that. I think also in part, I don't know if you'd agree, it's part of the British conditioning. I think maybe other places, so when I look at some of my American kind of counterparts, they're much better at maybe asking for that help up front. Whereas I don't know whether it's part of the British condition, but I don't want to ask for help. I don't want to ask for support and guidance from my network, but it's something I'm definitely guilty of. And secondly, I like and resonated with the point you were saying about kind of staying agile enough and not having all the answers. I think that's been a big learning curve for me. When I started out, I felt like I needed to map out the next 3 years, the next 5 years, be able to articulate my value prop very succinctly and tell everyone what I do and all this sort of stuff, whereas actually being a bit more kind of humble and say, look, I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know how my service is and, my support's going to evolve over time, but that's okay. I just want to keep up and keeping pace with how things are evolving. And I think similar to yourself, that human AI balance, I think, as you mentioned, the inflection point or the day of reckoning is going to come where people, you've got some people that are skeptical but know they need to adopt AI. They're not going to want to go fully fledged into these SaaS products. So maybe a human AI blend is going to work for them. I think the people that are a bit more bullish on AI and launch head on into the SaaS products are going to reach a point where they're like, actually, we need some human accountability and customization and a bit more of a bespoke approach. So I think either way, we're going to regress to the mean, which is hopefully where you and I think, are both trying to sort of aim of, that perfect balance of human driving the innovation and the service.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Anthony, have you got any kind of closing thoughts? It's been really insightful for me learning a bit more about your mission, unpacking, a bit more about the business and your goal of democratizing cybersecurity and digital transformation services while showcasing Nigerian tech talent. Have you got any kind of final thoughts and takeaways for the listeners?
Yeah, I guess it's that, again, embracing this new world. As humans, we've always embraced the new. I'm speaking to people all the time. Clients are just worried about certain things. And I would say, look, let's embrace it and let's be adaptive. These things will come, but humans will always be at the center. And that's my strong belief. We won't be replaced. We will be renewed. We'll come through, we'll do something else, but humans will always be at the center of technology because technology is ultimately for humans. If you got rid of all the humans, there will be no technology. So therefore, humans will always be at the center of it. So for me, that's what I'm driving forward with. And that's the whole idea of Enbros is how do we create that human-centric platform that can deliver value to our customers. And so that's kind of the part in the sort of a statement from myself is that we're here driving, we're innovating, and would love to have conversations, work with brand new ideas, no ideas too crazy, always willing to work and to collaborate, really.
Amazing. Well, I appreciate those final kind of inspirational words. And I'm not just saying inspirational. I think genuinely what I've got from this conversation is, there's been a lot of inspiring takeaways for me and hopefully I'm sure for the listeners as well. So really appreciate you sharing your story, sharing your mission, and definitely plenty of takeaways and things that I realized that I need to kind of get better at, but it's also been an incredibly cathartic experience for me. So I look forward to obviously keeping in contact, tracking your progress. And I'm sure we'll have some people kind of reaching out to you that have followed and engaged with this podcast, hopefully wanting to learn a bit more about what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure.